My name is Ashish. I'm your host today. As Whiteboard Labs and Bold, building opportunities for leadership development together, celebrating entire month of March 22, 111th International Women's Day. I welcome you all on behalf of Whiteboard Labs and Bold, who are here on Zoom with me and who are on our LinkedIn page, YouTube channel, and Facebook page. Whiteboard Lab and Bold is a unique knowledge and business partnership between Bold Inc. and Whiteboard Lab in the Caribbean region. The objective of this partnership is to develop and drive a new age workforce in the Caribbean, transforming humans to match the fast changing needs of the digital transformation revolution. Today we are in our last event of series, the Glass Ceiling. International Women's Day has become a time to reflect on progress, to call for change, and to celebrate the courage and determination of the women who changed history and those who will advance gender equality into the future. Today, we have two very strong women who have lived life on their life terms, who will talk about the diverse experience and vibes, and we will discuss the phenomena called the glass ceiling or the invisible ceiling blocking the growth of women in their field of work. So today our first guest is Ms. Nesha Yearwood and Dr. Safeeya Mohammed. Ms. Nesha Yearwood is a young professional who has served the UWI Open Campus for over 10 years. Ms. Yearwood formally joined the campus in September 2011 after serving as secretary of the CXC Summer School program for prospective fifth former. Over the years, she has provided administrative support to the Human Resource Department and the Academic, Programming and Delivery Unit before transiting into the senior administrative role in the Continuing and Professional Education Center. She currently serves in the newly established Student Experience Unit that is focused on enhancing the holistic student experience with the expectation of increasing student engagement, satisfaction, and success. Ms. Yearwood holds a BSc in Management with Spanish as well as an MSc in Project Management. As an avid believer in continuous and lifelong learning, Ms. Yearwood is also engaged in short course certification in customer service experience. She also voluntary assistant as facilitator for UWI alumni outreach program titled Preparing Today for Tomorrow's Challenge. Transforming children's life, she is passionate about engaging with youth, inspiring and motivating other and as much as possible leading by example. Throughout her career, she has encountered and been inspired by many women through those experiences. She has been learned invaluable lesson on the impact women can have on each other when they support and empower each other. Thank you, Ms. Nesha Yearwood, for joining with us today. We welcome you. Thank you. We also have a very distinguished guest with us, Dr. Safeeya Mohammed. Dr. Safeeya Mohammed has spent the past decade on a mission to improve not just the health, but also the wellness and well-being of the national community. From her many roles as a mom, medical doctor, philanthropist, and diplomat, presentations, and United Nations, to her travel to Goa, India. Dr. Mohammed was selected based on her continued work in the community and health spaces to be one of his country's youngest diplomats in the US International Visitor Leadership Program. Of this, she noted the experience meaning congressmen and women, high-level business person, and very active NGOs helped to further align her journey with the idea that we would bring this perspective to our country through governmental, civic, and community organizations. Dr. Safeeya Mohammed is a proud UWI graduate as well, class validation of the Faculty of Medicine 2004. And when UWI selected 50 distinguished alumni at their 50th year celebration. She was the youngest selected and the only female medical doctor. Congratulations, Dr. Safeeya. Dr. Safeeya Mohammed worked as a registrar at a Neo National in Intensive Care Unit at San Fernando General, also ushered in many compassionate programs and forward-thinking initiatives while there. There was a little in the way of compassionate care in the public health system at the time, so she created a support structure for families through counseling at the hospital in a new space that situated it. Now, Dr. Safeeya Mohammed is focused more on experiential learning and consulting engagements in the health and wellness sphere, leading her to open her own company to achieve these outcomes. Sisu Global Wellness has one goal to transform life purposely and intentionally internationally. She served as the personal physician and Nobel Peace winner, Malala Yousafzai, on her visit to Trinidad, a pivotal moment on her career. Thank you, Dr. Safeeya, to joining with us. We welcome you all. So let's begin our
Thank you
show.
so much.
Thank you so much. So let's begin our discussion, and I welcome you once again, Ms. Nesha Yearwood and Dr. Safeeya, on behalf of our Whiteboard Lab and board. So I'll first request to Dr. Safeeya. See, it's a generally thought or felt that health and wellness as an industry is a good fit for women. What do you think?
Thank you
Over
so
to you,
much,
Dr.
Ashish.
Safeeya.
Thank you so much, Ashish, and a warm welcome to those who are joining us here at the Whiteboard Lab's 111th anniversary for International Women's Day. And I look forward to our conversation. I'm also looking forward to what Nesha is going to share. Quite an interesting young woman there. When it comes to the health and wellness segment or sphere, yes, it is perceived as a nice sphere for women. However, I want to start with that there's no area that should be off limits. There should be no area, be it engineering, electrical, computer, technology, anything that women cannot enter into. So that is probably one of our biggest barriers, assuming that certain fields are more established for females. Yes, we do see more females in nursing, in medicine, than we have seen females in engineering, in STEM, in computing and technology. However, those are the barriers that we need to break down.
Great. Thank you so much, Dr. Safeeya, for your valuable inputs. Thank you. Now, I'll request Nesha Yearwood. What do you feel prevent women from securing the most senior leadership role?
Thank you very much, Ashish. Thank you very much, colleagues from Whiteboard Labs and colleagues from Goal as well. And it's a pleasure to be here this evening in the company of Dr. Mohammed. It's a pleasure to meet you via this forum. In terms of what I would say is preventing women from securing those senior leadership roles, I think it comes down to three things. Still the gender bias that exists. And Dr. Mohammed spoke to some of those roles where there's still a very high gender bias in terms of what women should go into, what males should go into, and therefore crossing over or overcoming those barriers and then getting into senior roles into any of those professions can be very difficult. I think that in addition to that, it's also the need for even more, as we kind of term it, like women clubs, or where women come together and are able to mentor each other. So that also can cause or help prevent that movement of more women reaching into those senior positions. And very lastly, for me, the maternal role or the women's role, where women have to go through this process of either deciding whether they're going to delay or forego being a mother so that they can focus on their career, where they have to decide how they're going to juggle being a mom and working. And then if that is not the case and they feel like that is too much, then they might decide to just retreat from even breaking that glass ceiling at all.
Great. Thank you so much, Nesha. And I'll request Dr. Safeeya, like I have seen to you many times, in fact, on social media with your cute son. I'm just forgetting his name. And so Nisha gave the entirely different perspective what we are about to discuss. So I'll just request, just bring some light on your thoughts, Dr. Safeeya.
Certainly. And I want to pivot over what Nisha shared. Yes, we women constantly have to do that juggling of those multiple roles. And that's where that support system, that tribe is so important. However, it's also just as important for us to break our own internal, our intrinsic biases, because we have to be able to know when we feel comfortable to prioritize a certain role over another role. When my little one was blessed this world with his presence, and I say that without any doubt or hesitation, when he came into the world, he was premature, and I did have to take a little bit of time off from that busy career life because I was in the ICU as a senior medical doctor there, and I took that time off. However, there was a lot of guilt, both placed internally by my own self and by those surrounding. This is where your support, your tribe really makes a big difference. Now he's 10 years old, and I have had the opportunity with him in my own way, being able to help him break the biases by incorporating him into the chores at home. There's no difference if it was a girl only doing the chores at home. Boys can just as well, do those chores at home. However, we've seen when it comes to women, when it comes to these stereotypes that has been associated culturally, socially, those are the things that we can, on our own way, in a grand way or in a small scale, start breaking those biases. And I've started those biases, breaking it with Musa. When it comes to the organizational level, however, we need to, and it's documented, gender parity, the equality of the roles that exist in the organizational space, in the leadership space, it's not yet an equitable level. In fact, it's actually said that no country, and this is what bothers me tremendously, no country has fully attained gender equity. Yes, there's some countries in European side, Iceland, Norway, Finland, Sweden, that has been bringing up that level, having more women in leadership roles. And that's where we can focus on training, development, as Nesha said, mentoring, creating those tribes where we can open opportunity and reduce the gender gaps. So when it comes to leadership, organizations, governments, policyholders are very much, we need to hold them accountable to reducing that gender gap.
Very well established, Dr. Safeeya, in respect of a professional and a mother. Right. Thank you so much. And you have mentioned the equality role existence. So I would like some input or insight from Nesha Yearwood from her professional career experience. What is there any existence of this equality role existence, Nisha?
As Dr. Mohammed mentioned, I don't think that we are there yet in terms of having that level of equality within the workplace. There's definitely still more males in those senior leadership roles. And even within the UWI, I've worked for the UWI for basically my entire career. And even though I joined during a period of time that was still very inspiring and exciting for me, because our principal was a woman, our deputy principal was a woman, our CFO, our chief financial officer at the time was a woman, as well as the HR officer was a woman. And that was the the HR director was a woman, and that was the unit I was coming into when I joined the campus. But so even though that was exciting and inspiring, I think even looking at it still within those very senior roles, there's still a way that we can go. And as Dr. Mohammed mentioned, in terms of having that tribe and working together as women, and the opportunity of hopefully, as we progress more into the future, more women going into roles where they can sit on boards and they can help influence some of these changes as well. I think that will be very important in driving that equality further.
Great. Thank you, Nesha. So, Dr. Safeeya, but like after listening Nesha, in your experience, how real is the glass ceiling?
So that glass ceiling exists sometimes only in our minds. I have found that the minute we decide to be brave, the minute we decide to switch around our mindset, that we have that capacity, that intuitive powers that we are blessed with to break that glass ceiling. However, we do know that there are indeed a lot of restrictions out there, a lot of barriers out there that unfortunately place those rules in holding us back. Let's just take a quick example in terms of motherhood. If the workplace is not equipped to have childcare, the mother is obviously forced to choose a role. If the workplace was better equipped, let's just say a breastfeeding room, for example, then she might feel much more enthusiastic to return to her workplace faster because there are indeed those supportive mechanisms. And that's where these are some of the factors that has these glass ceilings. Another very huge glass ceiling that we need to break is too often when at the workspace or within the table of leadership roles. It's great that Nesha shared that UE has a lot of women in those leadership roles, but that is certainly not what we see in some of the corporate sector. Now they are moving upwards and trying to reduce that gap, but many times in those roles of CEOs and CFOs, there are indeed males. Now, we're not saying that we must occupy all the roles. We just want to know that there is the opportunity, there's the facilitation, and there's that level of equity for those roles.
Great. Thank you so much. So, Nisha, the next question is leading to you after listening to Dr. Safeeya. What do you believe the future holds of women breaking the glass ceiling?
I think that there are some great opportunities. Yes, challenges remain in terms of still there's unequal pay in terms of that woman's role and that mother and that maternal role. There's still those challenges that exist. But in terms of opportunities, there are more and more women now pursuing higher education, and we've seen in these last years that there are more and more women reaching to the point where they're leaders of countries. So for instance, in Barbados, we have a female head of state, a female prime minister, a female deputy prime minister. So we are making some movements, and I think that those provide opportunities for hopefully more policies to be in place to support other women that want to move in their career as well. I think that we have males that are more supportive of women working and women getting to those points and understanding it a bit more to the point where we started from, where they more males just wanted the women to stay at home and wasn't ready to let go of that mindset or that culture. I think that has changed quite a bit, and there's opportunities then for that to continue to change even more. And I think in terms of us trying to identify ways in which we can break that glass ceiling and ways that we can look past the challenges of our own work-life balance, if you might say, is I see that even more women are looking at those flexible options. How do I still feel fulfilled in what I do, but still have time for my family? How is this through different entrepreneurial avenues instead? of just the corporate avenue. And I think that that is also something that can impact and influence a lot of change.
Perfect. So, Dr. Safeeya, after listening Nesha, do you think men have a role to play in the gender equality and shattering the glass ceiling?
Without a doubt. And men are our allies. And I want us to bring that into the conversation. There's no compete. Women are not competing against men. Men are not competing against women. It's a matter of allyship. It's a matter of really understanding that supporting women's rights is supporting human rights. You support the development, the growth, you foster the growth of a woman. She then fosters the growth of that community, of the family. So it uplifts all. It's very much a domino effect. So yes, men have a tremendous role in fostering women equality, gender equality. And how can they do this? By simply, first and foremost, one, understanding that there isn't that competition, in knowing that on the, as they say, on the boardroom, if there isn't that voice, let's try to find that feminine voice to include in the decision-making process. We understanding also that women bring unique traits. Yes, we are more nurturing and more compassionate. That has shown to be good, to provide good business sense as well. In fact, there's several studies that link our compassion, our resilience, our grit to that of productivity. So understanding, changing the perception, changing the attitude towards incorporating women more into these roles is definitely a good place to start.
Perfect. So again, I'll come to you just after Nisha. So Nisha, after listening Dr. Safeeya, what do you think? There should be an equal scale of measurement of men and women when equaling their respective performance in an equal role?
Can you repeat that, please?
Yeah, but should there be an equal scale of measurement for men and women when equaling the respective performance in an equal role, evaluating the equal performance?
Yeah, definitely. I think that that is what we need for men and women to be held accountable for their contribution that they make in the same way, and not for it to be based on your gender, but what is the contribution that you bring, the qualifications that you have as well. And we see that sometimes women have to prove themselves to be even more qualified than they might need to be, or that the male counterpart might need to be. And therefore that shouldn't be the case. The measurement should be the same.
Great. So, Dr. Safeeya, the event and the session and the discussion of this main motto is that what would be your first recommendation down the line generation to handle this glass ceiling from your side?
So to break that glass ceiling is, first of all, to understand it does not exist. Honestly, I believe it starts with the mindset and understanding that we who have reached, or as they say, broken that glass ceiling, that we women also have that accountability, that role to bring our sisters upwards as well. I am a firm supporter of that upwards mobility, in that mentoring, in that fostering, that empowerment. That breaking of the glass ceiling is also can be achieved by looking at the organizational structures, looking at the policies, see where there can be further inclusion of the feminine voice. Even when we're looking at economic situations, looking at budgeting, we need to also put more focus on maternal health, on maternal leave, on paternal leave as well. So there needs to be that equity across the board. And when we look at what the barriers are, if we can address those barriers, then we certainly will equal the stakes.
Great. So, Nisha, what would be your recommendation in terms of any affirmative action for organizations, families, and men to ensure gender equality?
And let me start. Organizations, families, and men.
Yeah.
In terms of the organization is therefore ensuring that we lobby for the equality within the organization. We lobby for that equal pay. And therefore, if we notice these things that are wrong, that are not correct, then we feel like we have this voice to speak out against it so that we can be part of that change instead of allowing the change to fester and to continue. And sometimes that's difficult because you can get some impact because you want to speak out on these things or you're not for them. But that's the only way that we'll get to a point of change at the end of the day. In terms of the family, it's important then to have that supportive system. It's important that both players are playing an active role in maintaining that family and the home, and everything isn't placed on the woman, but we're working in partnership in that way as well, in terms of the genders. And in terms of, what was the last one? Sorry.
Men.
Oh, in terms of men, I kind of touched on the men in terms of the family and the home, because I think it's really important that they are also part of that support. That is not just the women that are lobbying for other women, but that if they see that inequality as well, that they would want that for other women, that they would want that for their sister, their mother, their daughters, and that's who they're speaking up for as well.
Okay. And Dr. Safeeya, what would be your recommendation towards this affirmative action for the families, men, and yes, organizations?
I completely support and agree with what Nesha said. I think we need a shift in that corporate culture. We need to understand that seeing both women, men at the workplace, at the leadership roles, will obviously have a positive impact on the growth of the company. It was actually said by Harvard Business Review that the businesses, that those that are going to be thriving and more successful later on in the future economy or the future of businesses, are those that favor or have that wider policy for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And we must look at what are the stereotypes that we have already been existed and the biases, and seek to break those stereotypes down. Those companies that have this culture that unfortunately, inadvertently, when they're hiring, they may inadvertently hire or favor those of men. We need to ensure that there is that equality there. That is a definite way of reducing that entire gender gap that we talk about. Nesha mentioned the pay gap. That as well is so important. There's been studies, there's been videos, researchers showing the CVs of women and men and the same exact role that they hold. However, their pay, their salary, their compensation would be significantly different. We need to be compensated and ensure that there's that reduction in that gender pay gap. Those are definite ways that the corporate structure can look at assisting, being our allies in breaking this glass ceiling.
As far as my observation after hearing you, gender pay gap is going to be the big gap towards the glass ceiling. Am I right, Nesha? The gender pay gap is really exists as of now?
Yes, it definitely still does. And I think it also exists not only in fields where that might be dominated by men, but also from the aspect that there are roles that women are more prone to, and therefore those roles might not be compensated to the level that the roles that men dominate in are compensated for. And I think that that's another thing that we need to look at in terms of looking towards the future for breaking this glass ceiling and breaking down this gender pay gap, because then it kind of gives the impression that the roles that women might be drawn to or might have been drawn to before are inferior to those that are dominated by the males. And we definitely don't want our young girls to feel that way. If that's something that they're drawn to and they are drawn to in a nurturing way, and that's part of who they are, then we also want them to feel like this is an important and role that is on the same level and equal to that of a male dominated field.
Great. So, Dr. Safeeya, like I'm just getting some messages from social media, and they just wanted to hear from your side, your first experience when you felt the glass ceiling in your career.
Okay, so my first experience, I will never forget. There was a time that in a corporate organization that I had the opportunity to join to present an idea. At that table, there were 4 males and 1 female, and that was myself. And this was a very, very elite organization. And I requested it took us several steps for me to present this idea to them. And this was actually prior to presenting at United Nations Commissioner Status of Women. And never did I expect that when I hit that boardroom, there would have been no other females at that boardroom. I remember feeling like if I wanted to freeze up. I remember having to work through certain emotions and thoughts into my mind and to realize that, okay, if I open the door here and I am at this table, then my next step is to ensure that I have more support, more women at this table. So yes, I've been in many tables now where sometimes it's more men than women. It might be 2 women to 10 men. And too often we're in that spot. When we are in that spot, it is to remember, why are we there? 1, we are valuable and we are worthy of being there. And then 2, to open the door for others to come in.
I can get the sense of your experience and the freezing cold of that room. Thank you so much, Dr. Safeeya. And now we have received one question, like rather than discussion point in the chat. And this is for both of you. Could the panelists speak to the issue of the difference between equality and equity in the journey for women as they break the glass ceiling? I'll request Nesha first, you bring the light, then I'll come to the Dr. Safeeya, please.
In terms of the difference between equity and equality in the journey for women as they break the glass ceiling and the different issues that they can encounter. I think that in terms of being seen and heard as a woman, and sometimes as a young woman joining the organization, it can be seen as too ambitious, too assertive, and that can be viewed negatively sometimes. And I think that we also experience the challenge in terms of sometimes in terms of women, the understanding of why they're in this position or why they're there is viewed differently as opposed to a male. And that shows this difference of the viewpoint and difference of how we see it culturally in terms of the journey for women.
Thank you, Nesha. Yes, Dr. Safeeya, we'd like to hear from you.
No, thank you so much, Dr. Longswood. That's an excellent question. I think we need to understand the difference at a granular level of equality versus equity. And equity really and truly is what we want. It's recognizing that each person has a different circumstances and if they're allocated the same exact resources and opportunities that needed to reach to that equal outcome. And there's often a really great graphic that shows 3 different persons on different boxes, but each box is a different height, and each one of those 3 persons are different heights. And they all want to reach over this barrier to possibly see a video, to possibly see a cricket game or football game, etc. If it is the tallest person stand on the tallest box, then obviously they're going to look over. If the shortest person stand on the shortest box, they're not going to look over that barrier. There needs to be that shifting. So understanding what are the resources, what are the circumstances, and where there needs to be that buffering of those resources is where we would have a better understanding of how we can break that glass ceiling. We don't have equitable resources, and that's the big difference. So once we're able, it would be great in a perfect world where everyone has equal opportunity and equal resources, but that's not the case. And that's why there need to be certain compensations, certain adjustments in achieving this equity.
Talking about women breaking glass ceiling, and they ask.
So thank you so much, Dr. Safeeya. And I'll move to the next question. And this is from, thank you so much, Veronica Samanji. As we dream of the day when we no longer need to have this discussion, and in light of the fact that culture is primarily changed through education, what would the panelists like to see change in the way we educate our children? So anyone, it's a now open discussion. Dr. Safeeya or Nesha, anyone would like to?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Dr. Simon. I think in terms of the future and how we can change culturally through education, in terms of the education of our children, Dr. Mohammed touched on it a little bit in terms of what do we teach our boys as well, in terms of what roles do they perform, and these can be the roles within the household, not seeing it as these are all practical life, seeing it as these are all practical life skills, as opposed to, well, this is what a woman does in a household, as opposed to this is what a male does in a household. And I think in addition to some of that cultural change, it also needs to be in educating our not only girls, but our children on a whole more on the contributions that women have made. And I think that what happens a lot, what we see in history, is that the voice of the woman sometimes is excluded from the books. So we know that women are there and women are making a mark, or they're making a difference in some way, but we don't really have it to look back at when we go through history at what exactly did they do. And sometimes that's because a lot of things are written from the male's point of view as opposed to the female's point of view. But that inclusion as well in what is written and what is taught then and shared, so that all children can have a great understanding of these are the contributions that women make as well. And these contributions are so valuable and help drive and keep and sustain our communities.
Thank you, Nesha. Yes, Dr. Safeeya, your insight, please.
Brilliantly shared, Nesha. That is so important. One of the things that I did during this Women's History Month, being in the field of medicine, was bringing forward in the media, because I have a couple media roles, were women in history, in medicine, well before we thought that they even had presentations. So we talked about Marie Curie, what she has been doing. We talked about a couple other women in history, and in us bringing that awareness to the general platform, our younger girls can now see and envision themselves in those roles. Very much when it comes to education, we need to also open up those different spheres. In the past, it was taught that technological roles, physics, math was outside of the capacity of females. That should never, ever be. In fact, I have many friends who are female engineers. Just this week, I interviewed a female who is a pilot for a helicopter, a paramedic in a helicopter, one of the organizations within the region. So we need to no longer associate certain roles to a specific gender. Yes, there will be different constraints. That doesn't mean that we're not capable of it. So moving away those stereotypes, definitely increasing resources, increasing access, increasing opportunities is definitely ways we can indeed, when it comes to educating our women and removing this glass ceiling.
Thank you so much. And Dr. Veronica, written over here, indeed, the women in our history are very absent from the history curriculum. So yeah, it's true. Now, I'll take the last question. What is the advice by the panelists would like to give for women when they observe things happening in the workplace that are unfair, disrespectful, and exclusionary?
Thank you very much for that question. I think this is still challenging from the sense that, yes, I would advocate for women to want to speak up and to speak on these things that are happening to help drive the change. But I also understand how difficult that can be, because they can then be very dependent on whether they will be staying with the organization or, how that will go. But I think that as women as well, we should be able to be there for each other, to help to band together. And I think that once we come in number, they say, a fist is stronger than one finger, and being able to address some of these unfair and exclusionary things that are happening, if we come together, it can help drive that change even more. And I think sometimes it's unfortunate because sometimes what you can experience on occasion is sometimes that female sabotage where some females might not be supportive of others, or I kind of mentioned it a little bit where some females don't understand why some other females are in this position and they help sabotage their reputation as well. And I think we should try to get more from a point of doing that to each other, understanding that that these are females that have worked hard to get to the positions that they're at. And instead of adding to any unfairness or disrespectfulness that's happening within the organization, we strive to come together more to help to end and curb these things.
Thank you, Nesha. Yes, Dr. Safeeya.
We didn't get to touch on, as we talk about unfairness and discrimination, unfortunately, there's still a lot of sexual harassment in the workplace. And that is a level of discrimination that certainly, all organizations now should have a policy in place for dealing with sexual harassment. And whatever the circumstance, I know, as Nesha shared, and it exists very much so, many times women feel their voice is not strong enough. Who is going to believe them? There should be proper channels that are accountable for women to share those experiences, and of course the policies in place once that is indeed found to be true. She also touched on very important factor of women supporting each other. I've seen it with my own eyes, especially when it comes to even sexual harassment. A woman may share that story, and very often those that are putting her down or not giving the support might be the other woman. So we need to have that band, that tribe, without that level of judgment. If that's what the person shared, they must be able to not put an additional level of judgment, an additional level of bias onto that experience. So we need to be able to have those sexual harassment policies in the workplace. We need to also address the pregnancy discrimination. Quite often you see that. I remember very, very early in my career, a head of department in medicine said, He doesn't like females coming in. He doesn't like investing the training time because the minute they get pregnant, they leave. And I will never forget that specific statement and how it impacted me being a junior doctor. Now, it is also our right during that time to make the decision if we want to spend time with with our little ones and when we return. So we need to have better support systems in place to avoid that pregnancy discrimination because it exists all around. There's several other aspects of discrimination, too much for us to talk about right here. We can just start with those two policies in the workplace.
Thank you so much, Dr. Safeeya, and these are the very strong and immediate points. Thank you so much. So we have reached into the last segment of our discussion. So, and the final insight of the panelists, I'll request Dr. Nesha first to you, and then Dr. Safeeya from you. The final point or insight from yourself.
I think I would like to leave then with celebrating all women as they go throughout their career. It can be very difficult. And I think that breaking that glass ceiling or tackling the internal challenges that we can face sometimes even before we get to the external ones can be really difficult. And it can leave a lot of women with a lot of scars from having to choose constantly which direction to place their time. As a young mom, my son is 2 years old, and I can recall being in the meeting and he was crying hysterically, but I knew that he was okay. And I rallied on and I continued with the presentation that I was making. And at the end of the day, I was lauded for it because I was able to present even though. And I remember leaving that meeting just feeling I had to sit in my feelings for a little bit, because even though I knew that he was okay, I felt like in that moment, oh my goodness, I chose work, or I chose that meeting instead of him. And I think that for women then breaking the glass ceiling and making these decisions in terms of what time will you spend away from home, even if it isn't a child, but we're most often the caretakers or the caregivers to our families at times, and choosing in between that, I think that that's a very difficult decision to make. And I think that every woman then has to internalize and decide and do some introspection on what they want their priorities to be, what they want to rally for, if they want to rally for more flexibility, to be very intentional then in their decisions and how they're going to utilize their time. And if it is that they have to retreat for a moment to save themselves some scars, that's okay. And if it is that they feel that they can rally on and they can juggle both things, then that's okay too. And if it is that they have foregone some decisions for this time being so that they can advance their careers, then that is understandable as well also, because to be able to sit in peace with all the decisions that you make, because it's definitely a hard decision. It's definitely a challenge to be a woman, and a woman trying to move into leadership positions, or a woman trying to break the glass ceiling. But whatever you decide, I cheer you on and I celebrate all women.
Thank you. Yes, Dr. Safeeya, please.
Beautifully said, Nesha. Definitely, we are capable of breaking those ceilings. I believe it starts with our, like I shared, our intrinsic mindset, knowing first and foremost what our authentic goals are, and knowing that it's okay to adjust those goals and milestones as we move through that balance, or attempting to achieve the balance between family and career. Too often, there's this terminology of work-life balance. I think that that terminology needs to be striked off the entire vocabulary. It's more work-life blend, because I don't know anyone who's able to achieve that balance. It's an elusive gold. However, we can blend, and we are able to blend that career. Sometimes we give, as Nesha just shared, sometimes one aspect gets more attention than the other. If we so choose to give our family, our own personal lives more attention, then we should also do so without our own judgment and the judgments around, because that is our choice. We should not be having that associated guilt to our personal choice, because as women, we are also blessed with that intuitive power, that gut instinct, and your gut is never, ever wrong. So if that's the choice we make, then that's the choice that should be supported. I've been in that role where I made the choice of family first, and then as my little one grew older, when he actually was two, actually, Nesha, is when I decided to return into the workspace. But it adjusted, it changed my pivot, it pivoted my paradigm, I would say. And I moved towards more entrepreneurship. I developed my own company rather than the typical corporate structure. Again, we have to be able to understand and empower our own sense of self-worth and those around us, the women around us. That self-worth, that validation that sometimes we may seek comes from within. And more so, if we are to really break this glass ceiling, is knowing that your network is there. Form that strong network. Take time to build those relationships, because I have seen where tribe, they say your vibe creates your tribe. That tribe supports in breaking that glass ceiling. Another very important aspect of breaking the glass ceiling, and I mentioned it before, is having men as our allies. Men as in our partners, men in the workspace. When they are better able to understand the circumstance, there's that better ability to support, more resources, more structure in place. And in the case of your partner, my husband very much partakes in the chore work at home. There's no distinction between, well, my roles are the ones to be cooking and he's not. No. There's no difference in that distinction. And that's an important differentiation that we need to make going forward. And I think that is mirrored with my little one, because he very much likes to be part of the chore work, and he understands it's not his chores, it's his duty. So we can start at the home level and extend it to the organizational level. But very much we are capable of breaking that glass ceiling. I also want to encourage all women looking on here, take the time to read stories of other women and allow that to inspire you. One of the roles that I manage is the women's magazine in the Guardian. And every Sunday, Guardian newspaper, under the We Empowerment, so that's women's empowerment, that sphere, we share stories on women who are breaking the glass ceiling. This particular incoming week is that paramedic that I shared about. She is the first woman within the region who is in critical care flight and rescue paramedic. And she then decided to train other women to open that positioning for others. So when we read other stories, we feel inspired, we feel motivated, we feel empowered, and we also feel that we're not alone in our struggles.
Thank you so much, Dr. Safeeya, and very well said, Ms. Yearwood. Thank you so much. And yes, the great praise, Dr. Safeeya, work-life blend. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Now, I'll say thank you, Ms. Nesha Yearwood and Dr. Safeeya Mohammed. This was a very exciting and instructive discussion. We will definitely carry a summary of your points and recommendation and hope people like a feather out of your book. Thank you so much. So thank you all the viewers who have joined us today and those who may view later. I would also like to announce that Whiteboard Lab is extending our support towards women leadership by offering a free master course in Women in Leadership. You can visit our website at whiteboardlabs.in or whiteboardlabs.com.au and register for free. So once again, thank you so much on behalf of Whiteboard Labs and board. And thank you so much, Dr. Safeeya Mohammed and Dr. Nesha. Thank you so very much.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Whiteboard Labs and Bold, for bringing these forums forward. Thank you both.